Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Monkey Man, starring and directed by Dev Patel, who you would probably be most familiar with him from Slumdog Millionaire. And this is a movie that has a pretty inspirational story. It wasn't even going to see the light of day until Jordan Peele, who is one of my favorite directors, known for movies like Get Out, Us, Nope. He saw this movie, was so moved by it. His production company, Monkey Paw Productions, picked up the movie, got it in theaters. And for me, even though I am a fan of Dev Patel's work, it was having that Jordan Peele stamp of approval that really sold me on this movie. And it's that association that people have seeing a poster. You see it's directed by Dev Patel, but you also see Jordan Peele's name up on that poster. So it's like, okay, I know that name. I associate it with these other great movies. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that is kind of what I am expecting here. So that is initially what had me excited about this movie. But after the first trailer, I thought, this is something I would have watched even if it didn't have the Monkey Paw Productions name to it. But what this movie is about, you have a guy played by Dev Patel who is kind of an unnamed character, and he is competing in this underground fight club where his job is to lose. The promoter he is working with essentially puts him against these other really vicious fighters, and even though he could probably beat them, how he makes his money is really going through 3 rounds with that fighter, getting people to bet on it, and he gets a very small amount of money for doing so. He's really just barely getting by, which the movie has a lot to do with the class system, the rich and the poor, which I'll get into a little bit later, but he is just struggling with that. And he has this really deep rage inside of him. And what I loved about this movie and how they developed this story is they don't put everything up front. You go watch a movie like this, and oftentimes you get this entire character's story in the first 20 minutes. You learn all the things that go wrong in his life. How this movie sets itself apart is it really just drops him into that world of the underground fight club. You see he's getting beaten so bloody, there's stuff coming out of his mask, but you don't really know why he has this rage inside of him. And obviously something very traumatic has happened in his life. Essentially, he has had every single thing taken away from him from the elite of where he is living in India. And those elite have caused him so much pain in his life and really kept him down there at the bottom that you find him at a moment where he becomes a man with a plan. And he's going to take all this rage that has been building inside of him for all these years, the really awful thing that happened to him when he was younger, which you start to uncover, and really just go after these people. So some of the things you learn early on, which I don't want to spoil, but you see some of the actual physical things that have happened to him that he is dealing with. His hands are scorched. There's nothing on his hands, and they're just blank where you should have all these designs and marks in your hands. He has nothing, and you don't really know why. You see bits of his childhood and these flashbacks, which I really enjoyed because it's kind of like uncovering a little puzzle, a very dark, sinister puzzle as you watch the movie. As he is advancing in real time, you are learning as the viewer about his past, which I think is a really great way to do it because it could be kind of boring to put that all in the first 10, 15 minutes, and it feels weird and disjointed when you start with that. You want to start with the good stuff, and then learning it that way, it makes it so much more significant and impactful, especially when later in the movie you really find out exactly what happened, exactly why he is the way he is. It's able to build up so much more tension and just feels like, oh, okay, I get it now, and now I'm ready to get to the final act of this movie. So what he tries to do is develop a plan to infiltrate the people who ripped everything away from him. And how he does that, he mixes with his job at that underground fight club, and then a really devious plan that he comes up with to reach some of those people in power. And I just think that part was really cool. The first 20 minutes of this movie develops a lot of curiosities. It had me just wondering exactly what was going on. Also, the style of filmmaking was very different. It took me a little bit to get used to, but after I kind of understood the pacing of it, realized that they weren't going to tell you everything up front, it really made me enjoy it because it felt like something different, which is something I just struggle to find when going to watch movies this year. We've had a lot of duds. We've had a lot of things that just feel very repetitive. This felt like a breath of fresh air, especially in a genre where you don't really get that in primarily a straight ahead action movie with some thrills along the way. Oftentimes, it's very by the book, very textbook. It's usually just you introduce the bad guy, you're following the good guy, you want good guy to beat bad guy. But it was a much different path to that our character took in Monkey Man to face his demons. And what I would say is the most comparable movie to Monkey Man has to be John Wick, because John Wick is all about getting revenge, redemption, all those things, that vengeance, because in John Wick, they kill his dog, and the entire plotline of John Wick is him killing all the people responsible for killing his dog. And in that first John Wick movie, the action obviously set it apart. It was so much more brutal, over the top, and pretty much nonstop. Very little plot line. It was all about the crazy stunt performances, all of the guns and crazy weapons that John Wick would use. And then later in 2 and 3 and 4, they realized that that's what people loved about those movies. And they really almost eliminated all other plot lines and just said, let's get to the action. Let's get to the bullets flying. Let's get to Keanu Reeves fighting people the entire time. So you have that same element in Monkey Man. It's not as nonstop action. I would say there are even moments in this movie where you forget it's an action film. It just feels like a full-on drama. But when it does ramp up, it is very, very similar to John Wick in that style. But the other way it's similar to John Wick is being an action movie where the star hits rock bottom. Because oftentimes in American action movies, your hero is bulletproof. Nothing hurts him. He doesn't lose a battle along the way. He just comes in, beats all of his opponents, and just tries to work his way up to that final boss. But in John Wick and in Monkey Man, you see our hero hit rock bottom. You see them get hurt. You see them at their bloodiest, at their most broken, and you realize that they are not these bulletproof people, that nothing hurts them, that they can take down and defeat anybody. And by doing that, it makes it so much more impactful when that hero rises again, and it builds up that energy to overcome the hardest of obstacles, because you have to be able to take the audience to lows to reach those highs. And I compare this to one of the most popular action stars, The Rock, who has a clause that he can't lose a fight on screen. How is your hero not going to lose a fight? How are you not going to allow your character to be vulnerable and show that they are able to be defeated and have to come back from that? That is the reason I believe that Black Adam failed so badly, is because there was never really anything to overcome. His character was just fighting people the entire time, didn't have any problem, no character development. But in movies like John Wick and now in Monkey Man, you have that character development, because you follow them along more like if this was happening to you. If everything was taken away from you and you decided one day you just wanted to develop a plan to fight back, because in life, you're gonna have the crap kicked out of you. Hopefully just figuratively and not literally, but you gotta get back up. And what this movie did also really well was incorporate some really well-defined cinematography to put you inside of that action. There were some really great camera movements that really felt like I was right there along in some of the chase scenes and some of the fight scenes. There were also some really great uses of special effects that I feel like were somewhat comparable to like a horror movie, because the same way that John Wick has some brutal kill scenes, this one does the same thing, that I get squeamish whenever somebody gets stabbed. It's just uncomfortable for me to watch. Out of all the things, I can't watch people get stabbed, because my head goes to, if I got stabbed, I don't even know how I would react. And also broken bones. I can't do broken bones. If anybody breaks a bone in a movie, or even I'll just be scrolling TikTok sometimes and somebody, it's like a bone break skateboarding video, I cannot watch those. And as desensitized as I am to violence, just becomes the norm to me. Anything R-rated just becomes the norm to me. You break a bone and I'm out. But there were some moments in this movie, oh, that were really hard to watch because they involve stabbing and breaking bones. But I feel like to get that emotion out of me is a hard thing to do. So, especially in an action movie where I've really seen it all and nothing really sticks out, things stuck out in this movie. In particular, bones stuck out. And what this movie felt like was a modern folktale because even though it takes place in the real world, there are some moments where you kind of have to forget about reality a little bit and think, okay, I see how this could happen. And then I also think that Monkey Man gave us one of the best training sequences since Rocky, which is another thing that's really hard to do. But there is a sequence in the movie where he is training. Punching a big bag of rice was very reminiscent of Rocky hitting the big old slab of raw meat. And that moment was very inspirational to me because it incorporated a lot of elements of Monkey Man's culture and it felt like a ode to Rocky, but also showing that we're going to take something that is so American, but put our spin to it. Because this movie is also important for representation. You hardly see an actor like Dev Patel have the lead in a movie like this. So above everything else, that was the most inspirational thing for me to see, for him not only to star in this movie, but also be behind the camera. And for his directorial debut, totally crushed it because it's a hard thing to do to take a movie like this where your character is supposed to be seen as heroic. I feel like you could make your character look like you would like The Rock, like so invincible and so cool and so awesome all the time, which there are some moments in that training sequence where he does look like that. Takes off his shirt, everybody's so impressed, but it doesn't do it in a way that feels overly egotistical, which is a fine line to walk when you are the director and star of a movie, because what you say goes, and what ends up on the screen is highly reliant on you. But he did it in a way that felt very humble and very much like he really cared about the overall filmmaking process. He didn't really do this movie as a vanity project. I wanted to leave the theater, immediately go to the boxing gym, and just tear it up for 45 minutes. I was so inspired by it. But again, I don't want to give the impression, if you haven't seen it, that it's just nonstop, senseless action. There are moments that take away from all of that. I would argue there's a little bit of a lull. The film was under 2 hours, which I feel is the sweet spot for a big thriller action movie like this. Although I did kind of feel the runtime a little bit. Maybe it was just in that second to third act, there was like 20 or 30 minutes where it kind of lost momentum for a movie that started out so strong, really got to the story, really dove into the action once it was there. For a minute, I kind of wondered how they were going to land the plane. And if it wasn't for having such a strong ending, I feel like I kind of would have dipped out there in the middle. But overall, a great movie, especially if you're into action movies like John Wick. One that I feel enhanced my enjoyment of it, of actually seeing it in the theater. But I could see a movie like this once it goes to streaming. Maybe one of the big streamers picks it up. I feel this will have a much better life on streaming. So I don't necessarily think you need to run to the theater to watch it, because I almost think watching it at home, you'll get that same effect. But overall, I give it a strong 4 out of 5 Gorilla Masks.